Daily Rambam for Thursday, Chav Dalet Kislev Tafshin Pei Aleph, the fifth Perek, Perek Chamishi of Hilchos Shvisas Yom Tov. So in this Perek, the Rambam is going to continue discussing the details relating to Yom Tov. In this case, the details relating to Haitzah on Yom Tov. So the previous Perek we're dealing with food preparation, Tzedek Achila. Of course, Haitzah is also supposed to be Tzedek Achila, Tzedek Achila, but those were more food related, and this is carrying in general, although much of it will have to do with food. So in Halacha Aleph and Halacha Beis, the Rambam is going to talk about the idea of not schlepping major loads on Yom Tov. Halacha Aleph, Afal pi shehutra hitzah b'Yom Tov afilu shelo l'tzarech. So even though we said hitzah is mutter, not only is it mutter, it's even shelo l'tzarech. It doesn't have to be with a direct need. You still shouldn't be carrying heavy loads the way you do on a regular weekday. There has to be some kind of difference. And if you can't, mutter, then it's okay. What's an example of the shinoi of not doing it in the usual way? Maybe you're bringing jugs of wine from place to place. Don't transport it in a basket or in a box. Maybe you'll say on your shoulders, in front of you. If you're bringing straw, don't have it slung on your back. You can carry it in your hands.
So when he's saying Keita, you're talking about a case of that it's Tzedek Nefesh?
No, Keita just means back to the original point of Lo Yisam Asoyes Kedoyel Kedoyel Shoyes B'Choyel. Keita.
Nothing to do with Tzedek Nefesh?
We said even though it's Mutter Shaloi Tzedek.
By wine, when it's Melech or whatever Kadiyain, it's Tzedek Nefesh.
Right. So Rambam in the beginning says we don't make a distinction between the Tzedek and Shaloi Tzedek. It's all Mutter. And on the other hand, with this rule of not to do Kedoyel Shoyes B'Choyel, there's also no distinction. It's
you should no distinction, even if it's Tzedek Nefesh.
That's what the Rambam is saying.
Yeah,
he's talking. He gives example. The first example he gives is of wine. So.
In smaller vessels rather than
you're missing wrong.
Yeah.
What are you saying?
But I'm going to quote a bit from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe brings the halachas a bit differently. The Alter Rebbe is going to mention the idea of if it's all for a certain meal, and what's the point of doing it in a bunch of trips? It's going to end up being perhaps more tercha.
He doesn't see the relationship between Tevin and Yayin. Yayin, Manav Shach, you can relate it to a meal. How do you relate straw?
Right. The trick, I thought about that. The Tevin is Kakistam.
Stam, what's Tevin?
But we're not making a distinction here between the tzedek and the shloim tzedek and achila and avachila. It's all the same, and this is already
so
in the
you're allowed to really
Shvisas.
carry whatever you want, as long as it's not in mass.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what we're saying. You can carry whatever you want, but it should be less. It should be with a shinoi. Halacha Beis is a continuation. This is based on a Gemara that Rava said. He gave all these examples in Aramaic. Here the Rambam says it here that if you usually carry it on a pole, try to downgrade it. You have it on your shoulder. If you always bring it on your shoulder, on your back, have it on your shoulder. But it's usually on your shoulder. Keep on downgrading it as much as you can. Carry them in front of you, or at least put something over it. Now, the last things, they don't really make a difference, but it's just a shinoi. Any change you can make. And if you can't, nice, like we said, if it's still mutter if you can't. This is all spoken, this is all relating to a person carrying. But you should not use an animal at all for transporting loads on Yom Tov. That seems too much like a weekday activity. So the Mishnah, the Kadiyayin and the Tevin is a Mishnah, and the Halacha Beis is a Gemara.
Shvisas behema is awesome, or is part of.
We're just saying that you shouldn't transport loads on an animal because it's Kederach Shoyes B'Choyel. We're not saying it's
not because you're not allowed to use the animal on Yom Tov.
No, I'm not saying that. That's what the Maggid Mishnah comments on. Rabbeinu kasav tam lesser abahem shalayas kederach shoyes b'chovi. Yesh misha kasav. Others said that you're not supposed to be mishtamish the balei chayim kolikar b'yom tov b'shabbos. So the Maggid Mishnah merely comments that you shouldn't be using animals at all anyway. He says that Ashba wrote both, but the Rambam wrote this tam. Looking out to Rebbe Shulchan Aruch on the most of the halachas here. So the way the Alter Rebbe says it is that even though Haitzah is mutar Yom Tov afilu shaloi letzarech achila, The way that I'm always writes it is just a feel shalei l'tzerich. But Alter Rebbe is always careful to say shalei l'tzerich achila, but it always has to be somewhat l'tzerich yomtiv, which is why it's a shayla. You bring stuff back from shul for no reason if you don't mind leaving it on shul. So that's more the distinction you see in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. So the different examples, and the way he says it is that when you say wine and a sal and a kupa, what we're essentially saying is don't bring as many in a basket or a box, but instead you should carry one or two at a time, and then it's nicker. That actually indicates that you're not just doing shipments; you're taking something for a purpose. And then Alter Rebbe adds another detail when it's in public. But if it's bias in a chutzner, then you're allowed to bring a lot in a box. And Adrabah, it's better to have a lot in a box than to have a little bit, because then you'll have to make more trips. And it's also to matriach a tircha she'ein tzricha. So if it's within a yard, within a chutzner, then better to take a box. Alter Rebbe says the idea of not putting the tevin on your back is ignai yomtiv. It looks like you're undertaking a malacha rabba or going on a faraway trip. Alter Rebbe just gives a little more hatama to what the derech choil is in the different scenarios. And Alter Rebbe brings the idea of changing the mode of carrying it to try to downgrade it to less of an excessive sort of intensive way of carrying. Now, Alter Rebbe adds, when you get the beged, you said to put a beged over it, is you have to be careful, though, that you don't want to end up with schita, because if it's there's liquid and it's going to be schita and it'll be malabein, so he says it has to be something that's red, other mashkim that doesn't have an issue of malabein, so even if there's some schita, it won't be a problem of malabein. So, it's an interesting detail that Alter Rebbe adds there. And then Alter Rebbe adds, this is all kshaf shel hashanas, but if you can't be mishana, like, why can't you be mishana? What would be your reason? I mean, until now, the assumption was you didn't need all these things. So that's what we're telling you to downsize. But if you have archim, you need a lot, even if the archim are from the same ear, and it's not really a mitzvah chnas archim, but still you're in a hurry, so then that would be the case where you don't have to make a shinoi, and you can have a lot of kadim because you need all of them right now for this meal. That's how Alter Rebbe presents these halachas. Halacha Gimel. Some particular object. You can't lead the animal with a stick. A blind person can use his walking, his whatever the correct term is, but the stick he uses to guide him. Right, so I'll just quote from the way the Alter Rebbe talks about it in a second. So that's a shepherd with the bundle that he carries on his shoulder. And you shouldn't be carrying a chair of someone who's very important, so they'd have their followers following them with a chair. So whenever they pause, they can sit down immediately on the chair. So that also, it just feels like it's not appropriate for Yom Tov. It seems too appropriate, more appropriate for a weekday. But if it's taka someone who's very important and we taka need him to make this appearance, and you could follow him with a chair, might see an you could even carry him through the streets on your shoulders, and even in the specialized fancy chairs used for dignitaries, for important people.
That's what you want.
See how they treat important people?
Yeah.
So if you look at Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, this is in Siman Tov Kuf Chaf Beis. So the Alter Rebbe says that the Summa and the Zakein don't use their makel because it's derech choil, and the Zilza for Yom Tov because they can go without the makel, and it's just to help them be metakein eliyasher psi. That's the din of the Shulchan Aruch, that it's just helping them walk nicer. And the same for the Raya. Because it's derech choil. So then he says, but if he's a kiteya, if he's someone who can't walk, so then din b'yom tov kamei b'Shabbos commission is bar b'siman shin aleph. So perhaps the what we consider to be within the category of someone who needs a stick may have expanded to include more people, but the distinction of Shulchan Aruch is between someone who is helping him, I guess, mamish walk. It's like an extension of his legs, versus someone that it's just
it should be a prop.
right. Chashva people walk with sticks. Right.
Sticks
As recently as the Rebbe Shab Nafidik Rebbe, the Rebbe Shab brought him a stick, a nice stick, because he saw the other tzaddikim and he had more of an appreciation. He brought him a stick. Yeah. So yeah, told fairly recently, but so has to mamish be something that's mamish necessary in order to walk, not more of an extra thing. Not considered derech choil, even on Yom Tov. And the Alter Rebbe adds, when it comes to the chair, the way the Alter Rebbe says it is that you're allowed to carry someone down to the Rishus Adam, even if he's able to walk himself, and you're only carrying him just so that he doesn't get pushed around, or that he doesn't get dirty, or he's afraid to go himself, he's afraid he's going to fall. Since it's a little tzarech and this heitzah, so you're allowed to, according to Alter Rebbe, you have to always find what's the tzarech. It's a tzarech. But the kisei, that whole thing, that's derech choil. It's not respectful for Yom Tov. But if he's Rabbi tzrichim elav, either his chachma or he's doing askanos, he's doing something important. So then you can, like the Rambam said, carry him even on the Apirian. And the animal, the Alter Rebbe says in Ifdal there, that you can't lead an animal with a stick, even if it's inside a mavoi with an eruv, if there are a lot of people there, and even if you had put aside the stick before Yom Tov and you're meyached it, so there's no iseret, and there's no tiltal, so it's not even really it's not even Rishus Harabim. It's in a mavoi with an eruv, and it's still mepnei maris ayin that it looks like that this idea that it looks like you're going on a faraway trip to sell it. Otherwise, why are you taking this animal with the stick now in the middle of Yom Tov? That's how Alter Rebbe explains that. Halacha Dalin and the Rambam ladder. So you have the bird cages, whatever structure they were back then, and there was a ladder that led you to the bird cage. It was clearly an elevated thing, and you're not allowed to carry that ladder from shevach to shevach b'shus harabim in public domain. Shema yomru. Why? They'll say l'takin gagai hu melichai. He's not going from birdcage to birdcage. He's actually going to fix his roof. Middle of Yom Tov. But Rishus hayachid melichai. But in this case, you're allowed to do it in Rishus hayachid in private. Usually, the principle is it doesn't matter whether anyone actually sees you. Kani tiru pnei simchas Yom Tov. Here, there's some simchas Yom Tov involved. Maybe you want the bird to shecht it, I guess, or something. First of all, there's Ravid, the Mishnah, the background where these halachas come from. We're not getting into it. You're looking at Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Siman Tavkaf Yud Ches. The Alter Rebbe says they did them a bit differently. Alter Rebbe talks about three different types of ladders. It says the Sulam Shel Aliyah, the big ladder, almost like the stairs that you go up to the roof, to the attic. That you not to carry on Yom Tov, just like not to carry it on Shabbos. That was in Hilchos Muktzah. And even if you're not carrying it, you're just tilting it, it's still aser because muktzah you're not even tilted. However, you are allowed to go up and down on it. We're not concerned that you'll move it by going up and down on it. We have to go back and look at those halachas. Things that are very big, or they're not meant to be moved. Really, something in that category. But you're allowed to go up and down. We're not chayshish that you might move it a little bit because that would be a davar she'eino miskaven, so it's mutter. Then you have the next category, the sulam shel bayis, which is a smaller one, which you wouldn't really use to go up on the roof, and you only use it inside the house, so that you're allowed to carry around from corner to corner in the house, but you can't take it outside, even if there's an eruv, even if there's no heitzah, and even if it's for simchas Yom Tov to go to get the birds for Yom Tov, it's aser because of maris ayin. So the Alter Rebbe says this din applies to the sulam shel bayis, the sulam katan, because they'll say that you're going to go up to the roof and put mud, put clay. Since back then they had flat roofs, he has to explain that to the audience reading the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Because back then they had thatched roofs, but he's saying b'yamehem there were flat roofs and they were covering it, trying to waterproof it with tit. So that would be a reason why a person would want to go up, and that's why people are being chayshed him. No, that's why he's going up. He's doing malacha and Yom Tov, even though the ladder is actually too small. It's not. We just said it's a sulam. It does not go up to the gag, but maybe you could lean it against the wall and climb up to some things that are jutting out, and then from there you'll climb to the roof. That we don't have roofs like this. The Alter Rebbe says we don't do this on our roof. But the Gzeres Chacham is not bottled. Then Alter Rebbe says there's a third category, the Sulam Shel Shevach, which the Rambam mentioned, which is only for the birds. That, according to the Alter Rebbe is clearly going to a different shita here. You're allowed to carry it from Shevach to Shevach, even to the Rishus Harabim, and there's no shot of maris ayin, but you can tell from the size and the design that it's just for birds, and everyone knows that's the reason, and no one's going to suspect the malacha on Yom Tov. So that's the psak halacha is a bit different. Halacha, hey. You have fruit on your roof, or grain or whatever it is, and you need to remove them, move them somewhere else. So there's another din, you shouldn't pass them from roof to roof, even if they're the same level, and you shouldn't lower them through a window with a rope, or bring them down on ladders. This seems like a weekday type of activity. But you can lower them even through a skylight if it's somehow all within the same roof. Shachat behema basada, if you slaughtered, you shachted an animal out in the field. Another issue here, you should not transport the meat or the dead animal on a pole or on a bed. You can bring it in portions. So you have all kinds of just small things that are considered vachadik, and you have to do it a bit differently on Yom Tov, even though you're allowed to carry it. Okay, now the next few halachas, Vav, Zayin, and Ches, are about what you can send to your friend. So, if it's something that you enjoy, that you can partake of, even if it's just during the week that you partake of it, even if you have no immediate use for it right now, on Yom Tov, going tefillin, you can send it as a gift to your friend on Yom Tov. Because as we'll see, I will quote from the Alter Rebbe shortly, there's an idea of it feels nice to send gifts, so that's nice. Yeah? And it's obvious if that's the case, and for sure something that you could enjoy and use on Yom Tov, wine, oil, flour, as the Alter Rebbe will elaborate, even if you know it's not going to be used. It's certainly something, it all really depends on whether you're able to use it. On Yom Tov for sure, even if you could use it b'choil, it's also okay. But if the only way to use it is during the weekday and by doing a malacha, or something that you know how to do, then you can't send. So let's see some examples. Zayin, Ketzad, you can't send grain, because how are you going to use that during the week? Step one is you start grinding. That's a malacha. That's not something you can do on Yom Tov, even let's say but you're allowed to send beans or whatever it is, something like that. That's something you can cook directly without grinding. You don't turn it into flour. You roast them and you eat them. So it all depends. You can send animals even while they're alive, because you could potentially shech them on Yom Tov itself. That's the principle, and you can apply it to everything. And if you are allowed to send it, if you're sending it as a gift, as a fancy present to your friend, there shouldn't be a whole line of people bearing gifts. And that means when we say assur, we mean no less than 3. So you shouldn't have. So the Ketzad, what's the example? So if you're sending animals and wine, and there's 3-4 people, and they're all going one after the next, in one together, but one after the next. It's one line. That itself, just that whole setup, composition is also it seems too much of a weekday type of activity. But if it's 3 different types of things and they're all walking together, then it is okay. Look at Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. This is in Siman Tov Kuf Tezayin. So the way Alter Rebbe says it, I incorporate it a little more clearly, that you're allowed to send to your friend anything that's suroi, any food that's suroi to eat in that day, even if you still have to do some activity like that they're alive, and you really have to shech them first. But still, since you're allowed to shech them, you're allowed to send them, even if you know your friend is not going to shech them. But if you wanted to, he could. So it's mutter to send it, and you can send klei tashmish, all kinds of stuff that are any items that you can use, even begodim that aren't sewn yet. You could still use to lean on them. They have some use, and even a kalayim you can send if it's a very tough material, which we say that the alpidin you're allowed to sit on it, so it's useful for something. And even something that's not derived for that day, but if you could have a no during the week without doing a maisa like tefillin, you don't do anything to the tefillin itself. It's not like you have to do a malacha with the tefillin.
Why do you have books there? You had no intention to touch the tefillin.
So there's a whole question of what the gather of tefillin is, the Gabi Muktzah. I didn't have a chance to see if the Alter Rebbe directly addresses that.
Even Shabbos,
But anyway, if you're
allowed to carry to tefillin.
Usually if there's Even if it's
If it's outside.
On Shabbos, you're allowed to carry it home.
even
In
if
your house, you're allowed
well,
to-
even if it's a form of muktzah, but it would
The house
probably
is
be
no shayla. Talking about no shayla.
right. But the problem, it might still be mutter. Let's say gufay mekaymai. So you want to send it as a gift, so maybe it's okay. I didn't have a chance to see the. We came up before also. We asked, "Is it muktzah?" I didn't have a chance to look that up.
You have to treat them with respect, regardless of what it
Yeah.
is. That's it.
So it's clear you can't use it on Yom Tov,
Right.
and he's saying that b'chayil you wouldn't have to do a ma'isa begufa. There's no additional ma'isa you'd be doing with these tefillin. And even though it's also to carry anything you don't need on Yom Tov, as the Alter Rebbe always points out, there has to be some tzedek Yom Tov, and l'chayil this is the tzedek hachayil. So what's the tzedek Yom Tov? He says no, you're nena v'sameach by sending gifts to your friend. You're enjoying sending the gifts, so that's tzedek simchas Yom Tov for you. You feel you sent the gift. But if it's something like tefua, where you must grind it, and that's also you can send it. Kidneys you could send, and that's all. Alter Rebbe adds if it's derech Rosh Hashanah or derech Carmelis, where you can't carry on Shabbos, so therefore on Yom Tov it can't be shloil tzedek Yom Tov klal. But if it's a place where you can carry anywhere, like it's a chutzner, there's an erev, so then you can send even tefua, anything that's mutter to be carried on Yom Tov.
We said about the tzedakah collectors yesterday. We mentioned that they
Right.
tzedakah meaning of
Right.
food as a tzedakah.
Right, just a little bit more low key without
Low-key,
announcing. Right, but they're transporting food around as well. Yeah, and now that mentions this additional din that the Rambam mentioned in Halacha Ches about the row looks like a zilzal Yom Tov, but and there the Alter Rebbe says even if you are allowed to be metaltal, this din is not totally on whether you're allowed to be metaltal. Even if it's in a chutzner, even if it's in a mavoi, it's the appearance. Here it's the appearance of walking in a row, so that wouldn't matter where you are. Halacha test. Moving on to the second portion of the Perek. Really, the rest of the Perek is on this theme. So first, let's read Halacha test. So we already mentioned in Erev and Perek Ches. For those who remember, we said there that Isur Tchumen is the same on Yom Tov as it is on Shabbos. That there's no difference. It's equal on Shabbos, Yom Tov, and Yom Kippur. Is only Shabbos and Yom Kippur, but not Yom Tov. So therefore, you make an Erev Chatzeres and an Erev Tchumen for Yom Kippur, but you only make an Erev Tchumen, only an Erev Tchumen on Yom Tov, not an Erev Chatzeres for Yom Tov. So now if you made an Erev Tchumen, so now the rest of the paragraph is going to be discussing if you have various objects, what the din applies to those objects, how far can they go? Whose 2,000 amas or whose area do they acquire? And that's going to be the rest of the Perek. Even though, now, interestingly, these halachas in Shulchan Aruch are included in Hilchos Shabbos, in Siman Shin Tzadik Zayin, not Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. The reason why they're here is because in Gemara and Mishnah, it's in Maseches Beitza, Perek Hey. It starts off in the Mishnayos there. And why is it there in Mishnayos? So I saw the Perek Yisrael says that one of the halachas there, which is I think the last halacha here in this Perek, something to do with borrowing in order to cook. Since one of the pratim has to do with borrowing in order to cook on Yom Tov, so it ended up being included in Maseches Beitza, and then it ended. I guess that's how it ended up here in Shvisas Yom Tov in the Ram as well. But this is actually just as well the case for Shabbos. It's just a question of objects and which tchum they follow. So that said, so his behema and his stuff and his peiros, they all have the same tchum as he. So you can only carry, even if someone else is carrying them and that guy has a different setup, they have to respect his tchum and carry it within his tchum. Now we're going to start talking about other objects where there's more of a question. So Yod Cheftze Hefker, so something that didn't belong to anyone. And the first person who shows up and says it's mine, now it's like his, it follows his tchum. Cheftze Agoy, what about if it belongs to a Goy? If the Yid wants to take them, so it's wherever they are right now, that's where the Shvisas starts, and it's 2,000 amas from there. Gzeira, Bailam Goy, Mishum Bailam Yisrael, and it's like a apparently form of a gzeira that we're saying that we apply it to a guy, even though the guy doesn't have a tchum, and why are we posing that on the guy's object? It's a gzeira. Peiros yatsu chutz tchuma, and because whoever the peiros were taken out of the tchum, they came back. I feel b'meiz even on purpose. Lo yafsidu mekayman. They don't lose the tchum. Peshen ka'adam sheyatsu ba'aynes v'chazu ba'aynes. Like a person who was forced to leave and he came back, we don't take away his 2,000 amos. So the same goes for peiros. Peiros don't have a mind of their own. So I guess wherever they're taken, it's always ba'aynes of the peiros. I don't know if that's the rationale, but something like that. Halach Yud Aleph. Hamaiser behemtoi libnoi. So a father gives his animal to the son. So who do we follow? Arehi karagle ha'af. We follow the father. Masara l'raya. A man gives it to the shepherd. We follow the shepherd. In this case, not the guy who gave it, but the guy who's going to watch it. Masara l'shnei rayim. And what if you gave it to two? Arehi karagle ba'lah. Then it actually stays as his. Because neither one can say that it was given to him specifically. What's
the problem over here?
Problem with
It says, what's the?
but it's not. We're just trying to determine in each case where there's more of a suffix, where there's two people involved. Anytime there's an object with two people involved, we have to ask: does it follow his alpayamama or his alpayamama?
Okay.
So if it's a father and a son, it follows the father. If it's a father and a man and a raya, it follows the raya. If there's two rayim, then it's neither. So it's still his. And that's the rest of all these halachas. It's all going to be a question of whose alpayamama do we follow. Yud beis. Mishu zimun etzle erchem yamtiv. Someone invited guests. So here's this interesting. If they were planning on bringing food to the meal, they can only bring it somewhere where the Baal HaSuda himself is able to go, and they can't take it out of that area. Shekol HaSuda Keragli Baal HaSuda. All the portions for the meal are considered like an extension of the man hosting the meal, like Keragli Archa, not the guests. Unless there was a whole, the Baal HaSuda was mezaka to them through another person out of Yom Tif, and they made it all formal, but otherwise it's considered an extension of the Baal HaSuda. Yud Gimel. Same goes if a man has peiros and it's a pekad and someone else is watching them elsewhere. And the people there made an erev to come to him. They can't bring his peiros to him. His peiros are like him. Even though they made an erev and they have it, but he didn't make an erev, so it can't come to him. That's if when he gave it as a pekad, he put it in a particular corner where it should be left alone. Of them, but if he didn't put aside a particular corner, so then we actually follow the person watching the pekadon. He's in charge of where it goes. Halach Yud Dalid. So now we're dealing with water. Bershel Yachid Keragli ba'olav. A man has a pit. Whatever is in the pit is like his, wherever his feet can go. If it belongs to an entire city, so then whatever applies to the city as a whole. They had the wells in Eretz Yisrael for those that were being oil b'regel. They were public wells. It's for everyone. In that case, there is no one particular person. It's whoever fills up water. Then that water becomes his, and then that water goes wherever he goes. The water that you fill will go wherever you go. If you have a river that's moving, or you have a well, a spring that's bubbling, karagle kol adam, it's like any person. So not fully clear. It sounds like maybe whichever person takes from them. Well, I think we'll see now. Alter Rebbe says differently. And what if it's coming from outside the tchum b'chlal? Is that a problem? No. You can still fill up on Shabbos. And certainly on Yom Tif, we don't say that the water belongs to a certain spot, that it was kind of Shvisas in a certain spot. That's the Alter Rebbe. So let me quote from the Alter Rebbe. In Siman Shin Tzaddik Zayin, like I said, that's where in Hilchos Shabbos and Hilchos Erev, and that's where these halachos are. In Shulchan Aruch. The way the Alter Rebbe says it is, a ber shel yachid is like that. That's the same. The ber shel ear is like the ear. If someone from a different ear came and he filled up, he still has to stick to the ragli anshe oisa ha'ir if they didn't make an erev. So then it's just 2,000 amos in every direction. What if one person in the city made an erev to Tzafin and one person in the city made an erev to Darim? I'm not going to get into the details, but that's a question Alter Rebbe discusses. Then Alter Rebbe says, however, if one of the Bnei Ha'ir filled it up and gave it to him, then it's Karagli Hamamale. Then all that whatever tzara has happened from if it's Kanshe Kola ear, then if one makes an ear this, one makes an ear that way, that can start causing problems. But if one of the Anshe ear filled it up and then gave it to him, then we just follow the person who filled it up because he filled it up first and it established it as his, and then he gives it to him. Bershel Hefker is like the way the Alter Rebbe says it is Karagli Hamamale Harishain. So that sounds like not that any Mali who comes. Maybe that was clear here. This Hefker that Karag Misha Zachab means the first person who shows up, he's kind of the whole thing. So it all becomes like him. Even though the warrior himself didn't have any shvisat ben hashmashas, usually we follow ben hashmashas, and the Chavtzei Hefker don't have a shvisa. But once he came, he was Zeicha Hefker, it all joins his Shvisa. That's all, Mayim Mechunasim, you have rainwater or well or something like that. But if, like the Rambam said, you have Naharis and Mayanis, since they moved and there is no Shvisa, even if they belong to one person, doesn't matter. They're constantly moving. Even the Mayan, even though the Mayan is technically really in one spot, but it's always moving and bubbling. So it's active, and it never settles down. There's no shvisa per se. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says Hareim Keragle Hamamali Harishain. Also here, that's not seemingly what the Rambam said, but the Alter Rebbe says it's like the first person who filled it up. So then they get his shvisa. Although the Alter Rebbe is seemingly only talking about whatever he filled up, because when he filled up, that stopped moving, right? So then that seems to be the same. But the way that the Alter Rebbe phrases it is a Mali Harishim. And then Alter Rebbe says this then that if they're coming from outside the Tchum, it's not a problem. We don't say that they have a shvisa, and even rain. Alter Rebbe adds, if the rain falls on Yom Tov in the city, it's Karagle Yanshe Yosa here. That's if it's outside the city within the Tchum. Certainly, if it's in the city itself, because there's no shvisa in the ocean or shvisa in the clouds, it's moving. It's constantly moving. And if you filled up water from a bar of Hefker for your friend, who do you follow? The person who filled it up, so the Alter Rebbe says you follow the one who filled it up. Even though while filling it up, he was mezakeh to his chaver, and you have a constant halacha of makbiyah metzila chaveda, ikona chaveda. You can be koined directly on behalf of someone else. But how does that zechiyah work? That whole zechiyah works because you could be zeicha for yourself, so you use the power of being zeicha for yourself to be mezakeh for someone else. So it's all mikay. So the gabe the tchum, we say it's kerag love. All right, moving forward in Halachas Vav. Shar Re'i, so we're talking about animals. So it depends what the animal's for. The animal is for Re'i. Re'i means Araya, it grazes. Karag Lianshe Yisrael, then it's like that city. V'shar Shel Patam, but if it's to be stuffed for shachting, Karag Lemish Lakacha, the Shachta B'Yamtiv. Then it's whoever actually takes it, buys it to Shachta. They should das Ba'alav, the person who has it before he sells it, is Lamachre, Lanoshim Acherim, it's to sell to anyone, even people outside the city. Because he stuffed it well, fed it well. Everyone hears about it to boy in the kachta and they come to get it, so he's not limited to a particular group of people. Or let's say the owner shechted and he sold the meat. Anyone who buys, they can take their portion to wherever they're going. That was the intention of the Baalim. Even people from nearby towns can come and take. We have to make an analogy. It's like the bird that's for everyone. Aloha tes Zion. Fire. So a coal is like the owner, like even if he's lending. So now we're going to talk about, from here on, really, we're talking about lending, borrowing, lending. So if you have to pick between the person who borrowed or the person who lent, we say the coal is like the bayalim. Mashal haves, but the flame is karagli mishi b'yada. It's like the person who has it. So therefore, if you go to your neighbor and you light something from him on Yom Tov, he can take it to wherever he's going because it's like him. You borrow something before Yom Tov, he gave it to him on Yom Tov itself. It's like the person who borrowed it because it's already discussed before Yom Tov. But if you borrowed it on Yom Tov itself, this is a usual occurrence. You always borrow stuff from him on Yom Tov. Harei Karagle Amashil, we still follow the one who lent it. What if two people borrowed the same item, the same piece of clothing? One is for the morning, one is for the night. There's a line. They have slots in the day. So this actually makes it worse. You may recall this from a previous brakim. It only can go to wherever both of them are able to go. It grabs both of theirs, and now you have to make the whole cheshbon. One guy made an 8 of 1,000 amas in this direction. The other guy made an 8 of 500 amas in the other direction. So when the first guy takes it, he can't take it the full. Well, he really has 3,000 amas. He can go on his own. He has 1,000 amas till the Erev and 2,000 amas from the Erev. However, he can only take it 1,500 from where he starts off. Because that's as far as the other guy in the other direction can go. When the second guy takes it, you can take it even less. You can only take it 1,000 amas from where the kli is. Because that's as far as the guy in the other direction can go. So this may be familiar. We had this before.
I remember this one, the way to go.
Yeah. What if each one made it exactly 2,000 amas away from the spot, so then it can't move?
They cancel it.
Yeah. Halacha chav. And if a woman borrowed from her friend, she borrowed water or salt, and she used it for a dough, for a dish. And it also has this din that you have to take into account both of them. Or two people that together got an animal and they shachted on Yom Tov, even though they split the portions now, it's considered to be both of theirs, so it can only go where both can go. But if it's a barrel that they got together and then they divide it on Yom Tov, here we say that no, once you divide it, it can go wherever you go. It became yours. So here's again the concept of yesh breida behen. So the idea being that retroactively, even though when Yom Tov came in, b'shas Shvisas, it was still mixed up, so it should be correctly shteyen. But now they divided it. We say this breida, and we say that retroactively we know that this portion of the barrel was his, and this portion of the barrel was his. It's as if it had already been separated and distinguished, as if it was not mixed. So why is a behemoth different? But you can't use the same logic for an animal. The portion that he was going to take, that he took, even if you were to imagine that, it's distinct somehow, it's its own part of the animal, but they're all, it's a live creature. So every part of the animal is deriving energy from the other part of the animal. All the limbs, all the parts are connected. At any given moment, you can ever pinpoint and say that this is his and this is his, because as long as it's alive, it's all mixed together, commingled. Therefore, you have the chumrah that you have to follow both of their combined chum.
This very last piece is really